Da das Thema dieser Unterhaltung ja Verleger und Autor ist, möchte ich einmal den jüngeren Zuhörern, den jüngeren Dichtern sagen, Verleger sind keine Wohltäter und können keine Wohltäter sein. Wenn einer 6 Gedichte geschrieben hat, kann er nicht erwarten, dass ein Verleger oder ein Staat oder eine Stadt ihn nun jahrelang erhalten. Das ist unmöglich. Und wenn ich den jungen Schriftstellern in dieser Richtung noch einen Rat geben kann oder eine Moral auf den Weg geben kann, so würde ich sagen, spät ankommen. Spät ankommen bei sich selbst, spät ankommen beim Erfolg, spät ankommen bei den Banketts und den Akademien, abwarten, was aus einem wird. Nicht nach 6 Gedichten, nicht nach 12 Gedichten denken, die Welt horcht auf. Das ist ein Standpunkt, den man ja in den Briefen, ich auch immer wieder sehe. Sie schicken 2 Gedichte und nun denken sie, man wird verblüfft sein über diese Genialität. Das ist nicht der Fall.
On August 4th, 2016, Milo created a new Wattpad account. He already had another one for his Pokemon fanfics, but this one was specifically for his first original fiction called The Zodiac Turner: The 5 Trials. The account has since been deleted, as have most links, so I can't give you any exact upload dates, but he probably finished his first draft between August and November 2016. Once it was uploaded on January 14th, 2017, a friend of his started an official Instagram account, and 3 days later, on January 17th, he published the Zodiac Turner via Amazon and even hosted a book signing in March. Milo is 14 years old and believes he wrote a book. The reason why I'm starting here and mentioning this at all is not to make fun of Milo for having a Wattpad account. In fact, I wouldn't even have been able to see any of this if I didn't have an account on there myself. I'm mentioning this because one of the most frustrating parts of the entire saga is Milo's chronic lack of patience. This entire graph here could have been prevented if he had released his Scorpio book in autumn instead of spring, and he hasn't stopped setting unrealistic deadlines since. Milo is just 23 years old, but I've known terminally ill people who weren't in as much of a rush as he is. There's probably 2 main factors for why this keeps happening. One is that Milo seems to be allergic to doing any kind of research into his projects before he starts them. That's what happened when he tried raising $8,000 via Kickstarter, failed, and then realized he actually needed $10,000, and it's probably what happened with Age-of-Scorpius. He didn't have any experience in publishing, and instead of doing research, he set an unrealistic deadline and has been paying for it ever since. But there is a second factor. Most people talking about this drama know that Milo wrote this book for 10 years, and since it reads like a first draft, it is easy to assume that he took 10 years for this singular draft. But it's actually worse. By the time of its release, the Age-of-Scorpius was in a quantum state simultaneously anywhere between its own 1st and 9th draft, the very first of which I already talked about here. It was finished 9 years ago, and ever since then there was no point in time when Milo didn't believe that his book is ready for publication. The Age-of-Scorpius wasn't a singular catastrophe, but the culmination of a pattern of behavior 10 years in the making. The first half of which is that he keeps confusing a book's worth of writing with an actual book and immediately tries publishing it. The second half is that, inevitably, he doesn't get the positive feedback that he wants, so he starts rewriting it. The Zodiac Turner: The 5 Trials went up on Amazon in January 2017. The book was periodically up for free, and he later also published one of his Pokemon fanfics for free via Amazon as well. He'd claimed that that won him the 2016 Watty Awards, but it was actually just the Pokemon Watty Awards. Within the next 7 months, Milo would start rewriting his already published novel and recruited beta readers for it in March 2018. 5 months later, he'd start emptying his Wattpad accounts and also unpublished The Zodiac Turner from Amazon in order to transition into traditional publishing. After getting the beta reader feedback, he probably started rewriting the book again by the end of 2018. On January 24th, 2019, he sent out his first query to an agent. It didn't work. Milo is 16 years old and believes he wrote a book. By August 2020, he started rewriting the book again and finished his next draft around November, this time called The Zodiac Turner, The Age-of-Scorpius. He submitted that one to the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards and is a Silver Key winner for the Greater Kansas City Writing Project 2021. On January 11th, Milo uploaded his first TikTok. His strategy now was to build an online audience that could help him get an agent. This is where the story started for most of you, with Milo just out of high school, pre-transition, and still wearing braces. He's 18 years old and believes he wrote a book. Pause. We are 3 rewrites in at this point, but that doesn't mean that the Age-of-Scorpius was in its 4th draft now. Yes, the Zodiac Turner got rewritten a bunch, and Milo even wrote a first draft for a sequel called The Phoenix Bracelet, but between 2017 and 2021, the book had changed a lot. Both TCT and AOS were Zodiac-based fantasy novels with a Scorpio protagonist with the power of Zodiac turning, but the Age-of-Scorpius doesn't have 5 trials or a prophecy, and Gemini aren't the villains anymore. Instead, the main conflict now revolves around a Scorpio code that didn't even get mentioned in the Zodiac Turner. What happened in 2020 was a complete overhaul of the entire series, so the book Milo tried advertising to TikTok here most likely really was the first draft of Age-of-Scorpius. Of course, all of this was doomed to fail in the real publishing world. After a year of posting and reaching around 110,000 TikTok followers, Milo actually landed an agent by December 2021. He claimed that he'd now be revising this book for around 2 to 3 months before it would get sent to publishers, but he was still stuck in revision a year later. By November 2024, he and his agent had separated. We will probably never find out what exactly happened here because Milo keeps telling conflicting versions about that story. Basically, whenever he wants to look like a victim of the publishing industry, he'll claim that his agent suddenly dropped all of their fantasy authors, and when he wants to look like a passionate businessman, he says that he left his agent in order to defend his creative vision. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle and much more banal than you'd think, but without the guidance of a professional, there was now no one left to hold him back, so Milo fell right back into his cycle and tried publishing a draft that wasn't anywhere near ready. First, he tried fundraising via Kickstarter, and when that failed, he started self-publishing. We all know how well that went. The first 2 chapters of the first edition are actually still up on Patreon for free, and they're riddled with word choice errors, repetition, disjointed dialogue, bad phrasing, and stuff that doesn't fit the world building. Most of all, the stream of consciousness and order of description have no regard for where the reader's attention should be now. Even if he may have had an outline for the plot points, the prose as it is still has all the tells of a first draft where the author just writes everything down as they come up with them. Usually that gets fixed in later drafts, but that obviously didn't happen here. The book got ripped to shreds by reviewers, and as always, when he gets bad feedback, he started rewriting again, which is why we're waiting for the second edition now.
My name is Age-of Winter, and I am going to be redoing this book.
I really want to stress this because it kinda got lost in the discourse around this book. There's a lot of bad books in this world, but it's not normal for an author to completely rewrite and re-release their book like this. What's especially frustrating about is that he knows that he keeps rewriting his books, and he even knows that his previous drafts are bad.
Why is it in a cage?
Because it growled at me.
But he still hasn't connected those 2 synapses yet in order to realize that he has a habit of publishing bad drafts. One other factor is that Milo has one character trait that every writer kinda needs, but paradoxically turns him into a bad writer. And that is that Milo really loves writing. When he claims that he did his 10,000 hours, that he spends hours every night writing and even more daydreaming, I have no reason not to believe him. I just wish he'd stop writing new stuff when he's just supposed to edit the old stuff. And I know that this is what happened because he admitted to having added a completely new chapter that he just wrote on the day that he sent his manuscript out to the developmental editor.
So update after almost having a full mental breakdown, because Scrivener decided that it didn't want to convert Word files. I did it and it's sent to my editor. Now, I don't know. I hope it's good, but it did drop 10,000 words. So in case anybody was wondering what my fucking revision process was like after I said I was done with this book, I still dropped 10,000 words. That is so much. And then, oh my god, I wrote an entirely new chapter today too. Why did I write an entirely new chapter, you ask? Lesbians. Bye!
Looks like we found a chapter that genuinely was published as a first draft. Whenever I tell my editor friend new stuff about this drama, she starts asking if this book was written with AI, and I genuinely feel bad whenever I have to tell her that it wasn't. But it's not just that Milo apparently loves writing so much that he just can't stop adding new stuff even when he's supposed to be way too far ahead in the production timeline for that. Milo also genuinely doesn't know how editing works. Editing isn't just making the book better, you also gotta lock the book down. Sure, you'll start out cutting and adding chapters, shifting scenes around as you lay out the emotional through line, but there comes a point in time when the focus shifts from what you're writing to how you're writing it, and agonizing over characters turns into agonizing over punctuation. Milo never clocked that. Instead of limiting his second edition to typos, word choice, and awkward phrasing, which would have been more than enough work on its own, Milo laid out his process as a complete chapter-by-chapter rewrite, and the new version of Chapter 1 has a completely different plot from the previous one. It's also still just a second draft that should never have been made public in the first place, and once he's through this draft, there's still no guarantee that this is even still the outline that he'll want to go with. He's doing it again. Well, he already did it once more already, but we'll talk about Alter Life after I wrote my exams. See you in the next one.